Hi, Ted Morrissey here, doing a video from my American Literature Seminar. Listen to this. Sing to me now, you muses who hold the halls of Olympus. You are goddesses, you are everywhere, you know all things. All we hear is the distant ring of glory, we know nothing. Who were the captains of Achaia? Who were the kings? The massive troops I could not never tally, never name, not even if I had 10 tongues and 10 mouths, a tireless voice, and the heart inside me bronze, never unless you muses of Olympus, daughters of Zeus, whose shield is rolling thunder, sing, sing in memory, all who gathered under Troy. Now I can only tell the lords of the ships in all their numbers. First came the Boeotian units led by Latus and Peneleus. Arcelius and Prothenor and Clonius shared command of the armed men who lived in Hyria, Rachia Iulus, Shanus, Scolus, and Etinus, spurred with hills, Thespia and Graea, the dancing rings of Mycalaeus, men who lived around Harma, Elysian, and Ethrae, and those who settled Elion a bit later. The men who lived in Aspledon, Orchomenus of the Minions, fighters led by Ascalaphus and Iolamus, sons of Ares, whom Aristoche bore an actor son of Azesis' halls. Then Shadius and Astrophilus led the men of Phocus, two sons of Hephaestus, that great heart. A bit later, next the men who held the strong-built city of Athens, realm of high-hearted Eretheus, Zeus's daughter Athena. Then on and on and on. I'm, of course, reading from Homer's Iliad, specifically the Robert Fagles translation. And I'm reading it because it is an example of cataloging. This poem is about 3,000 years old, roughly, give or take a few centuries here or there. And so even 3,000 years ago, Homer, or a group of poets who we now think of and call Homer, very much recognized how effective the narrative technique of cataloging is. And cataloging is when a storyteller will just list item after item after item of people, of places, of objects, of whatever. Hang on, I've got to pause. Came back, had to let my dog in. He's a good boy, so he shouldn't have to wait at the door. So cataloging, listing people, places, objects, whatever, one after another, is a great way to communicate a bunch of information in a very abbreviated time frame. Now, originally, abbreviated would have been literally the time that the poet was taking to tell the tale, because the Iliad would have been an oral story, of course. Now, you wouldn't sit there and listen to the whole darn thing in one shot. It's divided into 24 books. A little parenthetical information here. It's divided into 24 books, which probably lines up with the 24 scrolls that the poem was originally written on when it finally was written down. But each scroll or book takes about 2 hours to perform orally. And so the thought is that in ancient times, when they would have these long festivals that would take several days to celebrate some holiday or whatever it might be, that maybe twice a day the poet would tell part of the story, book one of the Iliad, for example, and people would listen for a couple of hours. That's reasonable. Today we go to Marvel movies for 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever they are. And then maybe later in the day, after some wine and some food or whatever, they'd have another, book told to them. So over the course of several days, you could perhaps do the entire Iliad, just like we might go to a double feature, go to Barbie and Oppenheimer back to back on the same day practically, right? So anyway, Homer understood the effectiveness of cataloging. We find it in a lot of ancient literature. The Bible gives us examples of cataloging quite a bit. But it's not just the ancients. We can find it throughout literary history. For whatever reason, the postmodernists, the novelists primarily, who we think of as having written in the latter half of the 20th century, from roughly 1965-ish to who knows, again, the end of the 20th century, maybe slightly before then, it kind of fell out of vogue. But the postmodernists, for whatever reason, they really adopted the cataloging technique, and they used it a lot in their books. I'm talking about writers like John Barth, William Gaddis, Kurt Vonnegut, my own beloved William Gass frequently used cataloging technique, and so on. And this guy, Thomas Pynchon, who is sort of known as the high priest of 20th century postmodernism, and this is sort of the book that we associate with Pynchon, Gravity's Rainbow. And Pynchon does it. In fact, he does it very early in the book. Page 18 in this copy, we are introduced to the character that becomes the main character, the protagonist, the hero of Gravity's Rainbow, Lieutenant Tyrone Slothrop. And this book is set during World War II, and we're told that their desks are at right angles, so there's no eye contact, but by squeaking around some 90 degrees. Tantivi's desk, this is another character, is neat. Slothrop's desk is a god-awful mess. It hasn't been cleaned down to the original wood surface since 1942. Things have fallen roughly into layers over a base of bureaucratic smegma that sifts steadily to the bottom, made up of millions of tiny red and brown curls of rubber eraser, pencil shavings, dried tea or coffee stains, traces of sugar and household milk, much cigarette ash, very fine black debris picked and flung from typewriter ribbons, decomposing library paste, broken aspirins ground to powder. Then comes a scatter of paper clips, Zippo flints, rubber bands, staples, cigarette butts, and crumpled packs. Stray matches, pins, nubs of pens, stubs of pencils of all colors, including the hard-to-get heliotrope and raw umber, wooden coffee spoons, Thayer's slippery elm throat lozenges sent by Slothrop's mother, Naline, all the way from Massachusetts, bits of tape, string, chalk. Above that, a layer of forgotten memoranda, empty buff ration books, phone numbers, unanswered letters, tattered sheets of carbon paper, the scribbled ukulele chord to a dozen songs, including Johnny Doughboy Found a Rose in Ireland. And it goes on and on and on. So very quickly, on page 18 of Gravity's Rainbow, we are given this list of things that Lieutenant Slothrop has in and on his desk. And by giving us that list, we start to get a very vivid picture of a character who has just been introduced to us. So again, the technique is a great way to get across a lot of information, to make a very dramatic impact on your reader or listener, if it's an oral tale, without spending lots of time, lots of pages, developing detailed scenes to get across a lot of these ideas that we're forming just from this list of items, right? So Homer gives us a list of all the fighters who came to Troy to try to get Helen of Troy back from the Trojans. And so very quickly we get a catalog of all the different heroes who have arrived, including Achilles and Odysseus and Agamemnon and Menelaus and greater Ajax and lesser Ajax and the whole gang, and then how many ships they brought, how many soldiers they brought with them, etc. So very quickly we get across this huge mass of an army which has arrived on the shore at Troy to put the citadel of Troy under siege, right? So again, it could have taken hours and hours and hours, or pages and pages and pages, to get across that information through dialogue, through some other kinds of scenes. But by just listing them, boom, 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 one after another, we make that impression. Well, I bring it up because, as I say, we have encountered that in Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. which, as we know, is set during the Vietnam War. And O'Brien makes masterful use of the cataloging technique in the story. So we're introduced right off the bat to First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross, and we're told some of the things that he carries, including these letters from his hopeful to be girlfriend Martha. But then in the next little section, this is all on the first page of the story, page 469 in our anthology, the Scribner's Anthology of Contemporary Short Fiction. And O'Brien writes, the things they carried were largely determined by necessity. Among the necessities or near necessities were P-38 can openers, pocket knives, heat tabs, wristwatches, dog tags, mosquito repellent, chewing gum, candy, cigarettes, salt tablets, pockets of Kool-Aid, lighters, matches, sewing kits, military payment certificates, sea rations, and 2 or 3 canteens of water. Together, these items weigh between 15 and 20 pounds, depending on a man's habits or rate of metabolism. And then we get some specifics about what Henry Dobbins carries and Mitchell Sanders carries and so forth and so on. And so that's just the beginning of the cataloging in this story, as we know. We have these long lists, and then we'll have these sort of miniature scenes where things happen. And then O'Brien will give us more lists of things they carry not out of necessity, but because they're superstitious or because of a particular mission or something like that. So O'Brien makes masterful use of cataloging multiple times in a very brief story, but it would have to be a lot longer story if O'Brien was trying to communicate all this about all these different characters, all these different soldiers, through scene development, dialogue, those kinds of things, right? I mentioned in my written notes that it's not just a technique that novelists and story writers and poets use, because again, poets use it a lot too, but screenwriters use the heck out of it. How many movies and Netflix series, etc., have you watched where we are introduced to a character and we will get a sort of panning shot across maybe their bedroom or somebody's den or whatever it might be, and so we can take notice of the posters on the wall and the books on their bookcase and whatever else, the kind of bedspread they have, if it's a little kid's room or an older person's room or whatever it is. Or maybe we get a static shot of someone's desk, similar to the Gravity's Rainbow example, where we have a long time to look at what they have on their desk. Do they have pens or pencils or art supplies? Do they have a 38 caliber revolver sitting on their desk or whatever it might be, right? So it's a very standard technique in storytelling. It goes back longer than we know, but at least to the time of the Bible and the time of Homer 3,000 years ago. And it's very much a contemporary technique, which was used a lot by the postmodernists, but certainly didn't end with them. And we certainly, as contemporary readers, encounter it all the time. And as writers, we can use it ourselves, the cataloging technique. All right, I'm going to stop there, but it's something to think about and to watch for.